Hi, I'm Chris with Clutter Reduction Junk Removal in Southeast Florida. I've been doing junk removal for about 5 years now. Before that, I was a professional mover, which is a pretty similar industry with just a little bit more care involved of the items. And I did that for a handful of years as well. Now, something I want to talk about today is basically the ultimate guide, as to say, to get into junk removal. We're going to go over all the main key points, and then from there you should have a pretty good idea of what to kind of get used to get into the industry, and then you can do your own research to get a little bit more details to better equip yourself so that way you could start doing junk removal tomorrow. Now, junk removal has been the talk of the town for a few years now, especially during COVID. A lot of industries have skyrocketed during COVID, particularly because everyone wants to go be their own boss. Everyone wants to do their own thing. They want to create their own schedule. And junk removal, it's fortunately and unfortunately an easy in job and an easy out job, meaning it doesn't require a lot of certifications or skills to start. You really just need something to transport the junk in, and you need to be physically capable enough to move the items yourself or with help. Now, you don't need to be a professional mover, although it does help to know how to move people's stuff without causing damage, but it's not a requirement. And you might be thinking, because of how much is blowing up and how busy it is getting and how much competition is out there, that it's kind of a dying industry. And truthfully, it couldn't be farther from the truth. Junk removal is still a high demand because people seek out the convenience. Just like I mentioned with everybody wanting to become their own boss and do their own thing and control their schedule, people are also doing that with other jobs, and they're starting to value their time and convenience more than anything else. So although you may have people who budget and people who, try to pinch pennies on everything they can do, there's also a lot of people out there that think, I don't want to really deal with this. Let's hire somebody else for it. And junk removal is typically one of those things. So it's more of a burden to most people. That's why in our industry, we consider it a luxury service for convenience and time. So in addition to it being a growing demand of convenience, it's also increasing the awareness of eco-friendly disposal, which a lot of people are becoming more comfortable with. It's been on the rise for years. Everyone wants to recycle, everyone wants to have their things donated versus just trashed. And donation companies nowadays, they're backed up with availability. They don't have the time to come out in a timely fashion that meets your schedule. So then your next resort is junk removal. Otherwise, that person would have to go get a truck and do it themselves. And most people don't or can't do that. So again, junk removal comes in. And lastly, and probably the biggest for most people, is the profitability and the potential of the junk removal market. Assuming you live in an area of, let's say, 100,000 plus people in your county, you have a lot of potential to work with many different types of people and businesses and professionals to haul away their junk. And that could range from household furniture to household clutter and miscellaneous items, to appliances, scrap metal, debris, commercial cleanouts, storage units, evictions, the list goes on. There's a lot out there that, to a degree, needs junk removal on a daily basis. And the profit margins for that, junk removal is expensive to do. It sounds cheap, but it is kind of more expensive to operate the business. However, there is a high profit margin in it as well. It does take time, and it isn't the safest of jobs out there, but there is a high profit margin to it, which draws in a lot of people. You can go work in moving and charge 150 bucks an hour, and at the end of the day, you might be making 60, 70 bucks if you have help with you after taxes and payroll expenses. But in junk removal, you can make that same amount in like 20 minutes because it's not charged by your time. It's charged by how much room it takes up in the truck, or by weight, whichever one you choose to do. So in the grand scheme of things, it could be a much more profitable business without having to use that time, which is a big entrepreneur factor that people like to push for. So it works out perfect. Now, if you're looking to do junk removal, you kind of have to start with the vehicle. There's a few different ways. I've seen people use their minivans. I've seen people use their sedans, and they just shove stuff in the truck and they charge $20 a pickup. Don't be that person. If you want to, it's up to you. But try to do the right thing. Try to get at least a pickup truck. there's a few different things you can do. Pickup truck is obviously the most common. That's why anyone who has a pickup truck offers junk removal, because it can. It doesn't require a license in most areas, and you don't have to have insurance if you're not running it as a business or trying to do certain things. So at least a pickup truck is typically the bare minimum. And then you could do a pickup truck and trailer option. You could do a box truck. You could do a junk truck. A junk truck is kind of like the pinnacle of junk removal vehicles. It's what everyone aims to do. So we're gonna go over the pros and cons and the average gas, the average weight capacity, the average price, and a few other factors of each one to kind of show you an outline of what you could maybe use that would be best for your situation. Now, I spent a few minutes doing this, so be friendly, but I drew pictures because I think it helps with visualization. So we have the pickup truck, the number one thing out there. Average mile per gallon, about 10. Pickup trucks have been known to not have great miles per gallon. Whether you have diesel or not, it's still, at the end of the day, the cost is about the same, let's be honest. So you have about 10 for your average mile per gallon. Your average weight capacity, for most 3/4 to full ton trucks, you're looking at about 1,500 pounds, say 1,000 to 2,000 depending on the vehicle, but on average 1,500. So not a crazy amount, that adds up fast, but for the space, it is a decent amount. Your average volume without sides built on, so this is just your typical truck bed, no additional sides. Obviously, if you build sides on it, it's going to give you a little bit more volume, but the average truck bed yields about 2 cubic yards, 1.5 to 2.5, depending on if you have a 5.5 foot or 8 foot bed. And then you have your price. So this is a little tricky because obviously you can go buy a used up beater and fix it up, and you can probably get that for $5,000 to $15,000, sometimes a little cheaper depending on your area. And then if you want to get new-ish, you're looking at about 20 all the way up to as much as you can think. Trucks nowadays are drastically overpriced, but let's just say 20 to 65,000 plus, depending on if you want to get the one that's all customized with all the gizmos and gadgets. Now, pickup trucks are great because you can use them for business and personal use. It's a lot harder to drive around in a big old box truck and claim it as a personal vehicle. So it's business and personal. With that, you have good maneuverability. You're able to get around in tight spaces. You'll be able to park into parking lots easily. You can go into parking garages. You have more accessibility to the streets. And then lastly, you typically have cheaper insurance compared to the other options we're about to talk about. So overall, it's a good starting vehicle. All right, next vehicle of choice. This goes hand in hand with the pickup truck. You wouldn't be able to use it much else besides hooking it up to like a box truck or a van or something. But that is your trailer. Now you have two different types of trailers. Actually, you have three, but we're gonna talk about two. Utility trailer, dump trailer. Now there's a pretty obvious difference between the two, but we're gonna talk about them as if there isn't. So the utility trailer, we're gonna talk about the pros and cons before we get into the statistics. So for pros for the utility trailer, it's lighter in weight. Number two, it's easy to load because you have a drop down ramp. Number three, because it's non-mechanical, it's typically cheaper on insurance. And number four, it's cheaper overall. Now, the con of it compared to a dump trailer, of course, is that you have to manually offload it. Oh my gosh, how difficult. I'm just kidding. People give me crap for having a utility trailer. Just trying to defend myself over here. For the dump trailer, the Pro, you get to mechanically offload it. You don't have to sit there and offload it by hand. You push a button and it drops out unless your button breaks, which it happens quite often. And then the cons of it, pretty much everything opposite of the utility. Isn't that funny? So the cons, it is heavier in weight, which is more stress on your truck, and you may need a stronger truck to pull it. It typically increases your insurance costs because it is mechanical. It's also more expensive, practically 2 to 3 times the price, and it's a little bit more difficult to load. Now, some dump trailers out there are pretty low to the ground or have custom ramps, but for the most part, and the ones I've seen at least, don't. So you may think that it's easier to offload it, but now you have to manually lift everything up and push it into the truck and readjust it. So it's one thing when you have debris you could just chuck in there, or bags to chuck in there, but let's say you have like a 500-pound gun safe. You're gonna have to bring that to the end of the trailer, lift it into it, and then push it, get up and readjust it. not the easiest. Just putting it out there, just defending myself, guys. Now, the statistics for both, your average mile per gallon of your pickup truck when you have these attached is about 6 to 8 miles. So not a drastic cut, but you did go down a little bit. Your average weight capacity, this kind of varies by the size of it, but typically with a double axle utility, I would say you're looking at about 3,000 to 4,000 pounds, depending on the type of build you have and how heavy it is versus your gross weight. And then your typical dump trailer, you're probably looking at a little closer to 5,000 to 6,000 pounds, again, depending on the size. Your average volume for a 12-foot, you see I wrote 12 here. For your average 12-foot trailer, let's go ahead and say 7-foot sides, 4-foot height, you're looking at about 12 cubic yards. So pretty average size for junk removal. And then price-wise, for a utility trailer without the build, we're not talking about the build here, just flat out, you're looking at about 2,000 to 5,000, depending on the brand, the size, and the material. For your dump trailer, you're looking at about 7,000 to 15,000, depending on your area, the brand, and the size. Now, this next one is very popular for those who like to do moving in addition to junk removal, but there is a very important key note to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about that towards the end. And that is a box truck. Now, for the purpose of statistics, I went ahead and did a 16-foot box truck, which is typically what you're going to get in a Penske or a Enterprise truck. The reason I did 16 foot, even though it's a lot of volume, is because number one, a lot of franchises actually use them for junk removal specifically, because that way they can also use them for a small move if they need to. It's smart, it is. But in addition, when you start getting down into these smaller size trucks, you lose that ramp. Like think of U-Haul, for example. You don't have a ramp until you have a 14 or 15 foot truck, depending on your area, 15 foot in our area. Anything smaller than that, you don't have a ramp anymore. So now again, you go back to that dump trailer situation where you have to hand load stuff into the truck and then readjust it again. A little bit of a pain, whereas when you have a ramp, you can obviously offload and load very easily. So we use a 16 foot just for fun here. Obviously, you're going to see it has a lot of volume to it. What I would recommend if you're going to do this is divide the truck by 2. So when you go to a customer to charge them for junk removal, you let them know, hey, this truck is really big. We can fill 2 average loads in here, and that's how we're going to charge you. So make sure you communicate that with your customer. But for box trucks, your Pro is enclosed, which means that anything you keep in there is going to be water resistant unless you hit a tree limb. So you can keep all of your equipment in there. You don't have to offload it every day. If you have a really nice load and maybe you want to try to resell some of the stuff, you can leave it in there overnight. You don't have to worry about it getting rained on, having it get stolen. And overall, it just helps kind of keep everything contained. In addition, it has pretty good maneuverability. Like the pickup truck, a box truck, even 16 feet long, isn't too much longer. So you're still able to get through tight spaces. The main concern is actually your height. Your height is the main thing, and we're unfortunately going to talk about that very shortly. Another pro to it is that you have a large area for a decal. So if you want to get it wrapped, you have this huge flat billboard that you can put your logo, your name, and the type of services you provide. Great for marketing. Now, getting into the statistics, your average mile per gallon is going to be about 8 miles. Not great, a little bit less than the pickup truck. Your average weight capacity is about 4,300 pounds, based on what I researched. Your average volume is 37 yards. That's a lot. We're going to talk about that. And then your average price, again, you can find something cheap for $10,000, $15,000, but to get something that's not going to break down within a year, you're probably looking a little closer to like 20 to 50,000. So something to keep in mind. Now, something to watch out for. Some cons. Number one, for whatever reason, box trucks are more expensive than junk removal. I don't know if it's because it's not intended for junk removal, it's intended for moving and storing and transport, but for whatever reason, and I've had this confirmed with a couple of insurance agents, box trucks are just more expensive for junk removal. I don't know why, honestly. You'd have to ask an agent, but it is for whatever reason. So just keep that in mind. And then, as we mentioned before with the tree limbs, and I know this as a mover, it is common to cause damage to the top of the truck by hitting low tree limbs and hitting low archways at security gates. And it's very expensive to repair the body of a truck. Like, you hit a tree limb and you peel back the top corner, not a big hole, but it might cost up a couple $1,000s to fix. It's not cheap, I promise. So something to keep in mind. Otherwise, the motor on it, depending on the type of truck, may not be too bad for repairs and maintenance. So that is it for the box truck. This is the pinnacle of junk removal vehicles. This is what everybody strives to be. This is what the franchises have. And overall, it's worth its weight in gold. It's just not cheap. That is a junk truck. So typically a little box truck that's open topped and it dumps. So you get the best of all three worlds. Well, it's not enclosed, but you get the best of two worlds. So a dump truck, your average mile per gallon is about 10. Your average weight capacity is 4,000 to 6,000 pounds, depending on the class of the vehicle. Your average volume is typically about 12 yards for most junk removal trucks. And then your price is a whopping 35 to 85 plus thousand. Not cheap. The pros is it's great on maneuverability. Think of your pickup truck. Similar situation. You can park it right into a spot. You can't go in parking garages because you're a little tall, but overall, you're very good at maneuvering around. They typically have a flat front by the window here, so you don't have a hood sticking out. So if you're in a really tight space and you have to hook and turn, it's pretty flexible with how well it can steer, talking from experience. In addition, easy offload. Like the dump trailer, you can push a button and it all dumps out. Now, you might be thinking, well, then you're gonna have to hand load it. Yes and no. Most dump trucks are ramp and or liftgate compatible. So it may not have it, but you can get it. It's very common to have one. A lot of people don't for some reason, but it is very common to get one. And that way you can make it a little bit easier. And then the last thing is just like the box truck, you have a large space to put your name, logo, and services. So it's great for marketing. But that is it for junk removal trucks. Now we're gonna get into the next section. Now these next sections are gonna be a little quicker. That's a little bit more detailed. These are gonna be more just listing things out and then you can kind of figure it out from there. But essential equipment and tools, pretty common. Number one, safety gear. And we're gonna talk about this first because a lot of people bypass this because they think of it as such a simple service. But there's a lot of things that can go wrong with it, and we'll make a video about that a different day. But safety gear, goggles, masks, gloves, safety footwear, whether it's puncture resistant boots, steel toe, boots that come up past your ankle a little bit in case you're doing debris jobs. You don't have to worry about nails cutting down at your ankles, which could be really bad. There's a few different things you could do to protect yourself. Very common knowledge, but a lot of people bypass it. Number two, handling equipment, such as straps, dollies, hand trucks, and some kind of bin to move things around. Number three, tools, power tools, basic tools, sawzalls, chainsaws, pry bars. All of these are gonna help you break things down faster, whether you're disassembling a bed, or you're cutting up a swing set, or cutting up a jacuzzi, or cutting up a boat. It's all things to help you get things done a little faster and make your life a little easier versus using a screwdriver little by little. Next up, sorting material. You have bags, contractor bags, trash bags, bags for clothing, bags for trash, bags for debris. And then you have bins, trash bins, wheelbarrows, things that you can put stuff in heavier loads and wheel them out to your truck. Pretty simple. Next up, marketing. Probably everybody's hardest time besides pricing. Marketing is basically at the forefront. The easiest way to explain it would be to have an online presence through social media and a website. It's really all you need to get started. Number two, target your local customer by doing online advertising. You could do it for free, but you could do paid ads, get things by a little faster. It's just expensive. And community outreach, reaching out to your local businesses. And that's going to lead into number three, which is networking. Network with other professionals and other businesses. Go by places, introduce yourself and say, hey, we do junk removal if you ever need your stuff removed. Or go to a realtor office, hey, we do junk removal if your client ever needs junk removal during the buying and selling process. Be creative. I'm sure you can find a way to market yourself. And then you just got to put the work in or hire someone to do it for you. The next section is operations. So pricing for your services and materials. You need to figure that out ahead of time. Very simple. I've made a couple of pricing videos if you want to go back and look for them. But it comes down to visualization, being able to tell how much room something's going to take up in the truck. You can keep it simple and count it by the cubic yardage. Think of a washing machine that's 1 yard. A standard refrigerator is 2 yards. A 3-seater couch is 2 to 3 yards depending on the size. A love seat is typically 2 yards, and so on. You start to get an idea of what things are by volume, and you can usually just look at a pile and say, that looks about 3 yards. Okay. And then look at your truck, figure out your volume of your truck. So multiply the length by the width by the height. You're going to get a large number. You're going to divide that number by 27. That's going to give you your cubic yardage. And then you would divide that up into 4 or divide it by 8. And then you're going to charge every increment that you hit. So you'll have a minimum pickup. This is your standard to come out to grab anything. Most people will do up to about 2 cubic yards. And then you're going to have like a quarter of a truck, a half a truck, 3/4, a full load. And let's say you had a 12 cubic yard truck like we were talking about in the examples of the vehicles. Your quarter load would be 3 yards. Your half truck would be 6 yards. Your 3/4 load would be 9 yards, and then your full load would be 12 yards. And then you would have a minimum pickup that's up to 2. And that is how you would charge. So very simple. You just got to figure out your area and what the pricing goes for in your area. But the national average for a cubic yard is probably be about $50. So if you want to use that as a gauge, you can, but try to be competitive. Otherwise, you're not going to book jobs. Next up, as you get busier, you want to start planning out your route for your appointment, whether it's an estimate or a job. Don't just be bouncing all around the place, wasting gas and time. Try to be strategic with it. Try to book someone, okay, I'm going to this place at 9 o'clock, great. Next person that calls in, oh, you're over here, great. I'm going to push you to 12, and then somebody else calls in, that job's really quick, but they're on the other side of town. Let's push you to later in the afternoon. As you get busier, you're going to want to try the best you can with getting these done a little bit more efficient. In the beginning, you're probably just going to be driving all around the place, but as you get more efficient, you start getting employees, try to figure out where you can have like one team focus here, one team focus here, one team focus here, and so on. And then the last thing, of course, is to try to build a team of strong and reliable workers, people who know what they're doing, who have a good attitude with customers, who aren't going to turn around your back and go say, yeah, I'll take care of the job for $50 on the side, screw this guy. Be respectful to your employees, let them respect you back, treat them well, pay them well, and run it like a business. I don't have to worry about that because my only employee is my wife. So, yeah. And then lastly is insurance. For junk removal, you basically need general liability, commercial auto, workers' comp, and a DOT number for your vehicle if you surpass 10,000 pounds or fall under one of their other 10,000 requirements. So go check it out for your state. And then a couple of things to keep in mind is don't forget to get a business bank account. You can't be mixing your business and your personal bank account. It's going to be a nightmare for your accountant. It's going to be very expensive for a bookkeeper if you ever hire one. And it can also lead to some future problems if you ever have an audit. So get a business bank account. It's free to do. It's pretty easy. It's just a process. Also, try to budget in the beginning. Don't go crazy spending $10,000 in marketing material and getting the most expensive truck just because. Be conscious about it because you might not start off hitting the ground running, making a bunch of money. So you want to make sure you work your way into it. So I suggest you budget it just like you would your personal life. Next up, train yourself. Train yourself to be a mover. That is the best advice I can give for junk removal because everything you do in moving, you do in junk removal, but it's a little easier. And then the last thing is to get cheap materials in the beginning, which you can use using marketing. I'll have a link in the description, and that kind of ties into your budget. But that is everything for the ultimate guide, everything that you should technically need to get started. Any topic I touched on that you have more questions, you can probably just search my videos for. I probably have a video for it going over some more basics and tips. And if you found this helpful, comment down below. If you have anything to add in, if you've been doing junk removal for a while, comment down below for others to see. And at the end of the day, it's a pretty crazy industry that's getting more and more busy, but there's a reason why. And at the end of the day, I think there's enough to go around. And just like any other industry, handyman, plumber, contractor, pressure washer, window washing, there's thousands of businesses out there. Every day somebody's trying to get into it. But at the end of the day, you're going to have your core people who stick with it and build a brand. So don't be discouraged to start if that is what you're pushing for. So that is it for me. My name is Chris with Clutter Reduction Junk Removal in Southeast Florida. Hope everyone is actively achieving their goals for 2025.